Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity by the Maine Department of Education. My name is Joe Schmidt. I'm the Social Studies Specialist. I am happy and very privileged, we're very privileged to welcome back for session number 2 and part of our 3-part session series where we are hosting the Georgia Social Studies team from the Department of Education. Yesterday, Joanne Wood talked about upper elementary read-alouds. Today, we are going to be featuring Jennifer Zumberis, who's going to be talking about K-2 elementary read-alouds. And everybody's welcome to come back tomorrow where Joy Hatcher will be talking about K-12. Yes, high school read-aloud is also okay. So this is our ongoing series. Again, Jennifer will be our featured speaker for today. Joanne and Joy will be monitoring the chat room for everybody. But again, like I said yesterday, I'm very excited to have the Georgia team here. They are a great team. There's 3 of them working across those areas. And what I've always been extremely jealous about is their literacy retreats, where they bring in teachers and they head up to the Georgia mountains for a couple days with authors and books and reading. And it's something that I aspire to do. But since we can't all head up to the mountains this summer because of COVID-19, we're going to go ahead and invite Georgia to spend their 3 days with us here. So at this point, I will turn it over to Jennifer Zumberis and the Georgia Social Studies DOE team.
Jennifer, I was going to ask you, this is Joanne, but I was just going to ask you, do you want to hear some of the responses from the chat?
Sure, that would be great.
To your hook. So thank you to those of you who responded. A lot of people are picking different answers: windows, springboards, quiet corners, stepping stones, all kinds of the different possibilities of what a book is. Beacons and anchors. Sarah says they're windows to other worlds and time periods. Love reading period pieces, learning about other time periods. Flying carpets. Lots of different answers, and escape to different worlds. Thank you, Joanne, for singing Good Morning. That was really Joy who started that nonsense, but okay. Flying carpets, windows and portals. Love all of those. So there you go, Jennifer. Good responses.
Yes, I would have a hard time choosing just one, because I think all of these images within the cartoon, they kind of point to where you are in your life, at that exact moment. There are times where I've used my book as a quiet corner escape. There are times I've used my books as an escape hatch to get away from whatever was going on personally and professionally. Of course, springboards, so many times we use those professionally to build our ideas and grow. So all of those images are ones that I can relate to, and it sounds like you can as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome. We're so glad that you're here today for Getting More Bang for Your Book. This specific one is geared more towards K2, but if you missed Joanne Wood yesterday, please go back and check out her session. Joe has it recorded for you with all of her resources, and all of the things that Joanne shared yesterday with her session could be used K2 as well. So go back and check that out. And Joy, again, like I said, is presenting tomorrow. And I'm sure her workshop will be the same. So many things in her session will be applicable to K2 as well. That's kind of what we do as teachers, is beg, borrow, and steal. And we take a little bit of everything and figure out how we can tweak it to make it work for us. So don't hesitate to check those out. Like Joanne or Joe, I don't remember which, said, if there's something during the session that you have questions about, comments, just shoot a message in the chat and they will stop me. All right, so a quick welcome. My name is Jennifer Zumberis. I am with the Georgia Department of Education. As you can hear from the Georgia tone in my voice, I told Joe I'd try to throw out some y'alls and see what I couldn't get in there. I am the Social Studies and Special Education Content Integration Specialist. I'm about to have my 1-year anniversary with the department. I started last June, and I come from about 20 years of classroom experience. I did a few years 4th and 5th grade, but the bulk of my 20 years was K1, especially the last 15 or 16 have been all first. So I'm with you. I come from kindergarten and 1st grade land, and it's a totally different place to be. So hopefully this workshop or session will give you lots of things you can take back and use. Our goal today is just to explore some favorite books and how you can use them in your classroom to spark learning in social studies, but across the curriculum as well. And for our agenda today, we're going to hit some read aloud resources, both professionally and classroom. We're going to talk about how you can get more bang out of every book that you read. I'm going to spotlight a few books and give lesson ideas for those. I want to share with you some read aloud tools and then some of my favorite titles. And then we'll close with questions and answers and give you a time to share out books as well. Or if you have anything that you need me to elaborate on, I'll be glad to do that as well. I chose 3 professional books that have been special kind of in my read aloud life or my read aloud thinking. The one you see on the far left, and before I keep going, Joe has the handout for you that has every resource that I'm sharing. So if I give a resource, a book, a title, a document, Joe has the link to all of those for you. So if you're afraid you're missing something, don't frantically be writing. All of that will be saved and sent to you or placed in a place where you can find it. The far left, you see the ramped up read aloud. It's not really necessarily a cover to cover book. It's a treasure trove of titles. So as you go through that book, it's just full of different children's books. And within each title, it gives you different ideas for lessons, how you can use it across the curriculum. If you don't have that book, it gives you similar titles, or it gives you titles that you could bring in and kind of use together. Super, super easy, quick read that I can see being a resource that you would have Post-it notes, you know, hanging all out of the book. That's kind of the way mine looks. The one you see in the middle is Stephen Lane. It's Igniting a Passion for Reading. I got to go to the Dodge Reading and Writing Conference a few years ago, and Stephen Lane was one of the guest speakers. And he is phenomenal. And if you've never heard him speak, he is so passionate about reading and about literature and about getting books in students' hands. And this book, we were kind of battling this thing at school with reading incentive programs and like, was that the right thing to do? And did kids read because they love to read, or did kids read to get the incentive? So we really looked at this book as a whole faculty about, you know, what could we do to ignite that passion? So that book is beautifully written, super easy to read, but he just goes through and gives different strategies for making reading come alive for your students, but also ways that you can kind of very sneakily promote reading. You know, he gave examples of putting favorite books in your window of your classroom, so as students walk by, they could see which book you were focusing on or which book you were highlighting that month. So lots of great ideas there. Of course, the one on the far right's Lester Laminack. This is one of his newest books. He actually came to our Picture and History retreat last year, and of course I was totally fangirling that Lester Laminack was there. And then Joanne is like, oh, it's my friend Lester. You know, like they're great friends that are just talking like they've known, well, they have known each other for so long, but we're all just mouths hanging open that Lester Laminack is in our presence. But this is a great book, and if you've never read any of Lester Laminack's books, he writes the way he talks. He's super laid back and he's funny, and everything is just easy to read. So it's a professional book, but it's also a book that's very enjoyable. So if you're looking for some summer professional reading, I would suggest any of those titles. Where can you find great books? If you look at the links here that are on the screen, and again, they'll be in that handout as well. The first link you see is for the NCSS Notable Trade Books list. They have a book list for each year. It goes actually all the way back to the 1960s, but they have the last since 2000 on their list right now. And as you click on it, it's this catalog like you see here on the left-hand side. And within that catalog, it goes through and gives each title a brief description, the publisher, all that kind of information that you would use. And those books are carefully selected and vetted by a committee and chosen to be put there. So definitely books that are worth using in your classroom. The only thing you can't get is the current year. So right now, 2019 is the most current. 2020 should be here very soon. You can't look at the 2019 one right now unless you're a member of NCSS. But all of the other ones you can go back and look at. As soon as 2020 is posted, you'll have access to 2019. So if you haven't been there, definitely check it out. Also, the Carter Woodson Award winners, this is the site to get there as well. It has the winners from each year, the title of the book, the cover of the book, and the publisher information. And this last one you see down here is the link to our Georgia Council for the Social Studies. They have a children's literature page. This one is specific to Georgia standards, but I think that you'll find that most of these titles are books that would still work beautifully with your curriculum as well. It's broken down by grade level, kindergarten, all the way through the high school contents. And then they have the title. Some of them, I believe it's kindergarten, first and second grade, have the titles and a description as well. So definitely well worth your time to go in and check that out. All right, any questions there before we move on, or am I doing okay, Joy?
Everything looks good.
Perfect. All right, well, we'll keep going. So one of the things that we want to do with our books is we want to make sure that we're doing learning or providing learning that's transferable. So I tried to come up with some things that you could do for every single book that you pick up to use in your classroom. One thing that we always do is look at images using the inquiry, the C3 framework with, what do you see, what do you think, what do you wonder, every time we look at an image. So a great way to do this is as you pick up a picture book, do this with the cover. What do you see, what do you think, what do you wonder before you ever even open the book. That's a great habit to get your kids into doing with them, but then also when they're by themselves reading independently, they can do that as well. Checking out the back matter, a lot of times there is very, 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 very valuable information in the back of the book that talks about how the author researched the book, background history, timelines, all those things. It talks about the author's purpose, so that's always great to share with your students in an appropriate way. Sometimes with our little ones, they can only handle little bite-sized pieces, but that's definitely something that you can do with them as well. Doing a video analysis or a photo analysis as you're looking at the book, use it just like you would a primary source. Look at those illustrations closely. Why do you think the illustrator put this in here? Or how does this help tell the story? What questions does this make you think of? So constantly doing those stopping points throughout the book or throughout the video. Making writing and reading connections. We call them stop and jots. I don't know if that's a Georgia thing or if that's an everybody thing, but the initial idea with the stop and jot is that as you're reading a book, you would stop and the kids would quickly jot a note on Post-it notes. This is sidebar. I don't know if you have this problem. We have government Post-it notes. They're not the 3M Post-it notes. They're come from some warehouse and they don't stick very well. So every time I did any kind of lesson with Post-it notes, the Post-it notes ended up everywhere but where they were supposed to be. They're stuck on my shoe. They're floating around. So I started doing the stop and jots in the social studies journals instead of the Post-it notes, just because maintenance-wise, it was a disaster. And then that somebody's posted and the kids are trying to figure it out. It was a hot mess. So definitely, do it, but maybe not on a Post-it note. It's a great time for you to work on retelling, summarizing, sequencing, talking about the main idea, comparing and contrasting book characters. All those are things that you can do. Of course, making an art connection with our kindergarten and first graders especially. Sometimes they're not ready to write, but they can draw and they can share their favorite part and then label it, as they can appropriately. But drawing is something they usually feel somewhat safe with. Reenacting parts of the book, whether it's a puppet show or whether it's just them acting out different things, are always great. Sometimes in the book that I'm going to share with you today, we would even say, okay, stop. Who can show me what the character should have done instead? And the kids are all about that. They love being able to act out a favorite part. And then, of course, lastly, looking through all the lenses. If you were looking at this book as a historian or as a geographer, as an economist, as a political scientist, how would you look at this book differently, or how do you think they looked at this book? So different things to think about for every book that you read, not just one book. Okay, this book is called I Walk with Vanessa. It's a book that Lester Laminack actually introduced to us last summer in our Picturing History retreat. I don't know if you're familiar with it, if you can use your raise your hand feature or wave, whatever you want to do. But this is a great book I used at the beginning of the year to talk about kindness. So these are some essential questions that you could possibly use with I Walk with Vanessa. But the thing I love about these questions is they're transferable. And when you're thinking of questions or essential questions to use with the book, think about getting the most bang. What can you use? How can you ask this question so that this question travels over not just that book, but any book? And what you'll notice is that as you have those transferable questions that your kids kind of know to expect and know how to answer, they become a lot more confident in their answers as well. How can we change the way others are treated? How do our choices impact others? How can we show kindness? What can we do when we see someone not being treated kindly? A lot of times our kids don't know how to do this. They're young, and that's a skill that we have to teach. And then how can this book relate to events today or events in our history? And I especially love this one. How can one person make a difference? Because what you'll see in this book is one person, a child, makes a difference for everybody involved. And I think that's empowering for our young students to see that they can do that as well. I'm going to show you the video. This book is a wordless picture book. So I don't usually do video read alouds, but this one has no words. So you kind of have to show it in a big way because the kids are looking so closely at the images. If they can't see them clearly, it's hard. And I know this would never happen in your classrooms, but then it turns into, I can't see, so-and-so's in my way. And, you know, it's just drama. So I want to show you that video. As we're looking at it, though, I want you to think about how you could use this book in your classroom. I'm going to click on it. It's kind of loud. I've tried turning my volume down as much as I can, but there's music that goes along with it. So if you have to mute your speakers, you're not going to miss any of the content by muting, but I didn't want to blow your ears with the speaker. Okay, here it comes. how were you thinking that you could use that in your classroom? Does anybody have something they want to share out in the chat feature about how you would use the book, or what you noticed as we were going through the book, or if you have used the book, how have you used it? Is there something that you would like to share?
Jessica says teaching empathy.
Yes, absolutely.
And while we're waiting for other responses, I was just going to say, Jennifer, I cannot watch that story without crying. So
I know, it gets me every time. It's so sweet.
it's so simple and sweet. So I really, and powerful. Yeah.
Yes, and I think especially with our young learners, without having the words, they can understand the story through the pictures. And so much of what we're doing in kindergarten, especially, is teaching students to look in the picture for clues. It's just a beautiful book, that ties in across the curriculum.
Right. Megan says, I would use this with my special ed students that struggle with feelings and emotions.
Absolutely.
Jessica really loves it. Tammy says, by having the kids describe the feelings of the children in the book.
Yes, and the illustrator author does such a great job of, in the pictures, the color changes. In the beginning it's so dark and so gray, and then as they start becoming friends, the colors become more vibrant. And even the person who created the YouTube video, the beginning music was so somber, and then it kind of picked up the tempo, as they started becoming friends. But the facial expressions of the students, in the book, I think is so precious. And the little girl who kind of befriends Vanessa, that night that she's laying in bed, I think we've all had that night where we laid in bed worrying about something, and we're like, how can I fix this, or what am I going to do? And seeing both of them, laying in bed that night wondering or being sad was, to me, so powerful. But some great choices to go back and look at. So these are some things that I would consider doing with this book, and many of these books or suggestions are transferable to other books as well. But if I were doing this video with the children, the first thing I probably would do is just watch the video start to finish without stopping. But then after they had had a chance to really look at it, then go back through and stop it and have them talk about, what they see. What do you notice? What changes do you see happening? How are the characters feeling? One of the things that we do for our stop and jots is in a composition notebook. We call it a 4-square, where they just divide, the paper into 4 squares. And I would say, okay, go back to your first square and write how Vanessa's feeling right now. And then go back to your second square and then tell me what's happening here. So they just kind of go back to their spots and write as things are happening. You also could do this on a chart tablet in front of the students, especially the beginning of the year. If you're modeling, so much of what we do, K2, is model, just showing the kids the procedures and what we expect them to be able to do. Using a photo analysis, I would use the illustrations for this book just like I would use a primary source. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? And then ask students to prove their thinking. At the beginning of the book, how did you know Vanessa was new to town? Well, I saw the moving truck, I saw that she moved. Or how do you know she's sad? Well, you can look at her face. They can go through and give evidence. As far as writing or reading connections, like I said, writing in their journals, you could copy pages of the book and have them create thought bubbles or speech bubbles that they think the characters would be saying. Read books with them, similar characteristics or similar stories, and compare and contrast. How they're different, and then how does this book relate to something that's happened to you or something that's going on in the world. And then art connections, they could draw pictures of being kind, they could draw pictures of their favorite part, they could act out what they should do if something like this happened, playing songs about friendship, and then making signs to post around the school about kindness and about how to show kindness to others.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Just want to jump in. A couple more people in the chat. Liz says, perfect book for behavioral special ed students.
Yes.
Cindy said, also used to help peers become aware of the special needs students who are often on the perimeter. And this could apply to anything. EL students, students who have any kind of physical handicap, or all kinds of differences, just look different, come from a different place, maybe
Right.
have a Southern accent,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you've ever been the kid that moved in the middle of the year. We lived in Charleston for a while, and when we moved back to Alabama, I came in the middle of the year, and the teacher, the office staff, whoever, brought me to the class and set me in the front of the classroom, and the teacher went outside to talk to my mom. And I just remember sitting there in front of the class, staring at all these people, so embarrassed and uncomfortable and awkward. And I try to keep that in mind with new students, and that book would be beautiful for that as well. I want to go through these books with you that are similar. They all kind of reinforce that kindness. All of these to me are great books throughout the year, but especially the beginning of the year when you're building relationships. But you're also teaching students to look for character. And when we're talking about the character of figures that we study in history, they have to understand what character is first. So learning character through these books is a great way to do that, so that they can kind of carry over what they know to other situations. These books also all are talking about taking informed action or civic action, which for our younger students is a lot of times choosing to be kind or choosing to befriend someone who doesn't have a good friend bank, or people when things happen at school, what should you do? This first book you see here, Be Kind, if you're not familiar with that one, Be Kind I actually looked up on. I don't know if you ever shop on Amazon, but you know, when you choose one book, it'll say other people bought these books. And every time I searched something, Be Kind and Invisible Boy kept popping up. So, you know, I had to put it in my cart. You know, I didn't really have a choice. So Be Kind is beautiful. It's very simplistic. It's perfect for our K-2 children. The little girl in the book spills paint on her clothes in art, and they kind of laugh at her, and she's so embarrassed. So the other girl kind of spills paint on herself too. So she has a friend, and they just kind of develop this really beautiful friendship. And then part of the way through the book, they start talking about being kind and how important it is to be kind. But what I love is they give super practical examples that our kindergarten, first, second graders can do. You know, help a friend when they spill their lunch tray, play with someone on the playground, help a neighbor take in their trash can. You know, it's just super simple things that they can do. So many times they feel like it's too big for them, or they can't do those kind of things. Be Kind is very intentional about talking about things that young kids can do. If You Plant a Seed is Kadir Nelson. He was at our Picture and History retreat last year as well. Phenomenal illustrator, and just an incredible person to listen to. His story is amazing. But this book, If You Plant a Seed, is talking about what happens if you plant a seed of kindness, what will grow. It's about animals, and it has very few words, so it's not very intimidating for our little ones, but it's a great title as well. The Invisible Boy is kind of like I Walk with Vanessa. As you're reading it, it's a great book to look at the illustrations and analyze them. In the beginning, he feels invisible and he's gray. And as he starts to feel more visible by others and feel less invisible, the color starts coming into the book, and it gets more and more vibrant as he goes through. But kind of the same situation. Something happens. If I remember correctly, a little boy brings something in his lunchbox, and they laugh at him and kind of make fun of him. And the little boy's like, "Oh, it looks good to me." And they start writing notes back to each other. So when this little guy starts being kind to others, he starts feeling less invisible. So it's a beautiful book about that. The book down here on the bottom, you see One. It's a great story about how one person can make a difference, and it actually goes kind of through colors and through the lens of that, and talking about how we go through different phases and different feelings, but we can be the one to make a difference. So I think it's super appropriate for our young ones. This one, What If Everybody Did That? There's a companion book called What If Everybody Said That? If you don't have this book, highly recommended, especially thinking about your beginning of the year read-alouds. This is kind of like an if-then format. On one side of the page, you can see in this one, the little boy is littering. He's throwing stuff out. And they say, what if everybody did that? And then on the next page, it's covered with trash. There's just trash everywhere. Like, what if everybody threw the trash out? Or he's racing through the grocery store, and they say, what if everybody did that? But the great thing about this one is it has that repeated text of the what if everybody did that. So as you're reading it, the kids start joining in and saying, what if everybody did that? And, you know, anytime we can get them engaged, it's super exciting. That's a great book. What If Everybody Said That is the same way. It talks about the words we say and how they can help or hurt others, and what if everyone did it. And what if everybody did that kind of got to be our mantra. If somebody was interrupting a read aloud, or someone was doing that, you'd hear the kids say, what if everybody did that? You know, they'd kind of mumble it to each other. So definitely a way to bring attention to it for the students.
Jennifer,
yes.
a couple of other suggestions from our listeners, our viewers. Emily says A Spot of Kindness is another good one.
Okay.
And The Invisible Boy. One of them agreed with you. The Invisible Boy is so powerful. So, also Megan said Bucket Filler is a good one. I've seen that one as well. So
perfect. I will add those to our list.
I know.
Thank you. Each kindness you see there on the corner, if you can get through that book without crying, you're a better person than we are. It's just such a beautiful book about not having regrets and giving kindness at every opportunity and making sure that you treat people in a respectful way, and kind of how to fix things when you don't, because you don't always get that chance. But it's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's a little harder for our youngest kids, like kindergarten and first grade might have a little bit of a harder time with it. But I think if you teach into it, it's absolutely beautiful. I think they would love it.
And Jennifer, we did post a link. The second Google link that we posted is the one that anyone who's reminded of a book that you love to use in whatever way in your classroom, if you want to share that title, then we'll have a list we can all share. That second Google link is a place you can do that.
Great, that's awesome. So definitely take time to go in there and type. Even if you do it later, you can go in and add to it later. It'll kind of be a living document. So if we don't have any questions, I want to move into some tools that you can use with your read alouds. Does it look like we're okay to keep going?
Looks like we're good.
Okay, well, please stop at any point if we need to. One of the tools that I love, like I've talked about several times, are the social studies journals. I prefer a composition notebook just because the pages don't tear out and they don't get lost. But one of the things that we do, we had a composition notebook for each content area. And you can see here, we did a little piece of duct tape on each composition notebook. So social studies was purple, math was blue, science was red, everything kind of had its own color duct tape. And the great thing about the duct tape is if you have teachers that you're teaching with, everybody can buy one roll of duct tape and then you can swap it. So, hey, I'll buy red, you buy blue, you buy green, and you can cover the whole grade level because it's just, a little bitty 1-inch, 2-inch piece that you just put there on the binding so they can quickly tell which journal is which. And then you can see here, these are just two examples of students' work that they put in the journal. It's just where they went through and talked about, we were talking about showing love for country, and they were showing ways that they love their country. So super easy, very practical. You can have students write in it. They can illustrate. They can, we always glued in maps of our country or whatever we were studying. You can glue those in as well, but just a great place to house everything that they're working on. And the kids love going back at the end of the year and seeing the things they wrote at the beginning of the year, and they will argue that they didn't do that. Oh, I didn't write like that. Well, yeah, you did, but that's how much you've grown this year. So it's exciting for them to look at. Another thing that is crucial with our littles is they've got to have time to talk. They really need to be able to reflect, to share. This is no surprise, but they kind of live in the land of me, and they're used to everything being about them, and being able to take turns and listen to someone else, but also to respect their opinion, even if it's not the same as yours. That's a skill that takes a lot of practice. So one of the great ways that we do that is through looking at images. This time they're not looking at a book. They're looking at, these are actually pictures of rules in the library, rules on the playground, rules in the lunchroom. And they're talking about what rules they see the kids following or what things they see them doing. But you could do these same things with books, taking an image from I Walk with Vanessa or an image from Each Kindness and having the kids talk about what they noticed. But being able to share and defend their thinking is one of the big things that we work on in primary grades. So I definitely recommend you taking lots of time for that. These are some tools that I have created. Often I would send my students back to their seats or back to their groups, back to their partnerships, whatever, to work on something, and they would get there and they would have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing. So I created kind of some visual supports to go with that if they're working with partnerships or working with groups or even working independently with their bag of books. These are things that they can go back and use. And the main thing I use these for is when they're studying an image or an illustration if you're using it from a book. So the key, though, you have to teach into it, of course, first. You can't just give it to them and expect them to know what to do. But we always do, what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? And then you also, from there, can move into what's the same. How is this like something else? How is this like this book that we've already talked about, or how is it different? So you can go through and use that. And I would cut this up into strips and have them, you put it in their bag of books or in their social studies journals. And as they're working with their partners or working with their groups, they can use this to refresh their memory on what it is they're supposed to be doing. It kind of is an accountability measure. It holds them accountable, but it also gives them independence because they're not having to come and ask you, what am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be doing? This is another great image or visual if you're talking about looking deeply at sources or looking closely at sources. I tell the kids, okay, I want you to pretend you're stepping into this picture. So step with me and we pretend, you know, we're stepping into the image or the illustration. What would you see? What would you touch? What would you taste? What would you smell? So they're going through their 5 senses talking about, if I were standing in this image, what are some of the things I would be noticing? And it's just a great way to help them think deeply. Of course, like I said, we would do this independent as a group first, and then move this to independent. And then with the picture support, it can go into their bag of books or whatever you have them use in their social studies journals, and they can go back and pull this out as they look at other documents. And then these two are very similar as well. What I would do here in this blank spot is put in an image, a primary source, a document, an illustration from a book that you've read, and then have the students study it. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? And then this is a different version of that. It's talking about who's in the image, what's it happening, when was the image taken, where is it taken, and then kind of what's happening. So it's just different ways to look at it. If you teach second grade, or if you're the end of first grade, I made another document that's identical to these, but at the bottom of each of these two organizers, there's an empty space. So kids can actually write on what they're doing. Right now, we're having to do a lot of virtual packet kind of things, or packets for people who can't connect virtually. This would be a great way to send home a primary source or an illustration from a book and have students be able to look closely at that. This is a series by John Klassen. It's called, well, they're calling it the Hat series, but all three of these books can be read together, but they're also standalone. So if you only could buy one or only had one, you could use this with any of them. This is an article here from the National Council for the Social Studies, and it talks about how to use these hats, but it's actually using these books as a 4th grade lesson, but we could use them for K2 students as well. So in this book, we found a hat. These two turtles find a hat in the desert, and they don't know what to do with it because they both want the hat, and apparently hats are very scarce in animal land. So you can talk about scarcity, about making choices, opportunity costs, benefits, supply and demand. You can tie all of these things into these 3 books. This one, I want my hat back. Someone has stolen the bear's hat, and he's trying to find it, and he's going through all the books, all the characters in the book saying, have you seen my hat? Have you seen my hat? I can't find my hat. All of these 3 books have super, super simple text and are very appropriate. Even your K1 early students could read this by themselves if they had a little bit of support. And then this book, This Is Not My Hat, this little fish is real big and bold, and he decides to steal the hat from this big fish because he wants the hat, and hats are scarce in animal land. And he steals the hat, and he thinks the big fish is never going to notice. And it's kind of about that opportunity cost. You know, was it worth it stealing the hat from the big fish? You know, is that going to work out for you or not? So all of these things, you know, we don't traditionally think of these econ standards with these picture books, but they actually work beautifully when you think about it. These are some organizers that you can use with that book. These organizers both came from the activity that I just showed you here on this slide on the John Klassen hat books. If you click this link here, it takes you to the full article, but it talks about these snapshots. So I kind of consolidated this to make it work for us in K2. You could do whatever term you wanted. In this book with the hat series, it specifically talks about scarcity and choice, but you talk about where you saw it in the book, and then you have the students talk about where they've seen it in their own lives. So you could change this to fit any concept you're teaching. If you were teaching a character trait, where did we see kindness? Or where did we see courage? Or where did we see love of our country? You know, you could change it for any standard or any content that you wanted it to be. But the big thing is they're using an example from their book, but then they're applying it to their lives and what they see. So that's a great example there. And then once you've taught them how to do that, you could do the same thing that you did with the other one where they have this little strip, and they could put that strip in their bag of books or their social studies journals to go back and look at those ideas later. Same thing here. This is a content story map. Again, it was from that article, and I kind of adapted it to be used in a variety of ways. what was the who were the characters, what was the setting, and then what did you see, and then what was scarce. And then you give examples of things that were scarce so that you know were scarce. And then this is a picture version of it, so you could have them go back later and use this as a reminder of what they're supposed to do. It could go into their bag of books for them to use, or as they're working with partnerships and groups reading their own books, what did you notice was happening and what choices did the characters have to make because of that. In the document that I'm sending you, I've created 4 or 5 different versions of these that you could use for books, that you could use for images, that you could use for primary sources, or I've got a blank one in there that you could type on and fill out for yourself to use however you want. This is a new book. It just came out in March.
Jennifer, can I
Yes.
jump in?
Yes.
I just wanted to keep up with the chat with you. We have shared a Google link with these handouts. Also, Joe's going to be posting all of those at the main DOE site. We do find them very adaptable because one of our listeners said she works in a middle school special ed classroom, but she can see using these tools for our students who are cognitively
Good.
pre-K. So that's helpful. And Emily says, my pre-K students love the drawing class and books, but there are themes there I never even thought to use.
Yes, that's the way I was when I read the article. I had never
Yep.
thought about that. And then I started thinking of all these other books, that I could do the same thing with.
Yep. And then again, there's reinforcement of using them in special ed. Older students who are cognitively lower level, these can be very helpful too. And Joe's sharing with you where he's posting those resources, today's video, the PowerPoint, all the handouts. So you're getting a treasure trove from Jennifer today. Okay, well, Jennifer, we're caught up.
One of the handouts that I gave Joe as well has all the links to these resources, but it also has a link to a Google folder that has all of these documents, so you can save them to your hard drive and make changes or whatever. And if you have any trouble, I know sometimes they don't convert quite the same. If there's something I need to redo and send to you as a PDF, let me know and I'll be glad to do that. My email information is on there as well. This book is called All the Way to the Top. When we went to the NCSS conference in November, we actually got to meet this author, and this book hadn't come out yet, but it was kind of in the works, so I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. It came out in March. It's called All the Way to the Top, and it's about the fight for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And what I love about it is it's based, of course, off of the true story. And this is kind of, the little girl's name is Jennifer, and she's telling her story of what it was like. And what I love about this book is even our youngest learners can get it, which I thought, I don't know how this is going to work as I read aloud. But Jennifer talks in the book about all these things that she couldn't do, but she talks about it in a way that's super understandable for our young kids. For example, academically, she could be in any classroom, but because of her wheelchair, they wouldn't let her be in a regular classroom. She had to go to a different classroom, or she couldn't go eat lunch in the lunchroom with the other kids because her wheelchair wouldn't fit through the door. She talks about how scary it was to go down steps or to go over a curb because, there weren't ramps. So they explain it in a way that's really, really beautifully written for young children. That's very, I don't know, we call it an aha moment where you kind of go, oh, I didn't think about that, so it's very, very, very beautifully done. But one of the things I love about this is the primary sources that go along with it. This is the actual image of Jennifer climbing the stairs that day. And what had happened was, if you're not familiar with the story, they were fighting for rights for people with disabilities to have access to places that we have access to, and they should have. And these adults went to protest and were trying to climb the stairs. And they said, no, you can't do that. You're a kid. And she kind of said, watch me. And she got out of her wheelchair and she climbed up the stairs. And it took a very long time, but it talks about that and how hard she had to work. So one of the things you could do with your kids is study this image and talk about, what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? And I probably would actually even have them look at this image before they even read the book to try to have them predict, what do you think this little girl is doing? I think it would be even more powerful for them to understand the why after they had seen the what first. You could create a timeline of what she did, and the book goes through the timeline, has great back matter as well. You could take a tour of your school with your students and point out, what is different at our school because of Jennifer. This one little girl who is 7 years old what did she do, to make a difference for everyone else? You could point out handicap stalls in the restroom so wheelchairs can get in. You could talk about the different height of water fountains. You could talk about the doors being wider, showing the students that the ramps outside, that they can get it on sidewalks with. I know our school had handicap accessible buttons that you could push for the doors to open. So just showing your students some of those things and really pointing out the difference that it's made still today. These two YouTube links, the first one is about 4 minutes, and it's just Jennifer as an adult talking through what happened and what those events were like. The second video is about 1.5 minutes, and it has clips of that top video, but it also actually has the live footage of her physically climbing up the stairs. And you can hear her, this quote at the bottom, where she says, I'll take off if I have to, but they're telling her, no, it's going to be too hard. She very adamantly says, I'll take all night to get up these stairs if I have to do that. So I think even sharing this quote with your students would be beautiful for them to go through and talk about what does that quote mean and what does that tell us about her character. So that would be a beautiful lesson to be able to use as well. All right, any questions?
Jennifer, just a couple of comments. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for that book and the latest
it's amazing.
book. Yeah, and several people said they'll be asking their special ed director to get it or the library to get it and trying to get their hands on it. So
yes.
Great topic.
Yes, I love it. It's one of my new favorites. And speaking of my favorites, I tried to do a top 10 list, but I actually snuck in 11. And these books are just kind of random. They're a little bit all over the place. They're not specific necessarily to anything, but I try to think about if I could pick 10 books that were must-haves, I must have this book for my classroom, which would they be? So I'm going to quickly go through those books. I want to make sure you have enough time at the end if you have any questions or whatever. So again, all of these books are in that document, so don't be panicking trying to get them written down. The first one is Blue Sky, White Stars. Kadir Nelson, again, his illustrations are phenomenal. I feel like I can physically touch the images and they just come to life on the pages, but he does a beautiful job. The cool thing about this book, super, super easy. It has very few words on a page. I don't think there's any pages that have more than 5 words, but it goes through and talks about examples of patriotism and examples of love for our country. So one page says sea waves, but it's S-E-A, like the literal sea and waves. But then when you flip the page, it says sea waves, and it's the American flag waving in the air. Another page says sewn together, one, W-O-N, nation, and it's Betsy Ross sewing the American flag. And then the next page says sewn together, one, O-N-E, nation. And it's just talking about how diverse we are and how we fit together so beautifully. One page says stand proud, and it's got a girl who's graduating, and then the next page is stand proud, and I believe it's a soldier. There's one that says rising up, and it's astronauts going up to space. And then there's another rising up. I forgot what the other example was, but you can see my point. It's like a patriotic example and a real life example from our country. It's beautifully, beautifully written and illustrated.
Jennifer, Sarah says the illustrations in this book are beautiful.
Oh, they are. And that's definitely, like just looking at this one, this would be a great to do. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Just looking at the images, from this book, they're so beautiful. And what do you think they're looking at? There's so many different things that you could go through and talk about. I Have a Dream. Of course, this was not written by Kadir Nelson. He illustrated it. It's Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Working with young kids, sometimes it's hard for them to understand some of what the speech means and exactly get it. Kadir Nelson went through and did beautiful, beautiful paintings or illustrations to go along with the I Have a Dream speech. It's beautiful. And then the book also comes with a CD of the audio of the actual I Have a Dream speech. So it was beautiful to use those both together. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. Thomas Jefferson, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Everything. Myra Coleman was at the High Museum in Atlanta. They had an exhibit of some of her works. I was familiar with this one. I had read this in first grade, but I hadn't read some of the others. So several of my next books are Myra Coleman books. But the thing I love about this one is it's super appropriate for our young children. It's hard a lot of times to find historical books that are written to a level that our younger kids can understand. The illustrations in this are beautiful. And what I love is Myra Coleman just gives these random facts. And that's what the kids love. You know, they talk about how he had gardens, but then they'll say like a little PS, did you know his favorite vegetable were peas? Do you know how we know? And then it talks about how they know his favorite were peas because he had this tremendous variety of peas growing in the garden. Or it would say things like, you know, Thomas Jefferson woke up with boots on one side of the bed and his writing on the other. So he could jump up on one side of the bed and go outside and explore, or he could jump up on one side and read or write. And it goes through and gives these just crazy facts that the kids love. But then if you do the tour of Monticello, you can do the tour of his home. And if you can do the Skype, I highly recommend it. The ladies that do that are phenomenal. And they'll set up a time with you. And my kids wanted to ask her all the things from the book. You know, did he really have a table that spun around? Did he really have his boots on one side of the bed and his writing on the other? And they're like, yes, he did. And then they show the kids where that was inside the house. So they think that's amazing. But that's a great tie-in for that book as well. Looking at Lincoln, same thing. It's obviously the story of Abraham Lincoln, but she goes through and gives the random facts that the kids just love. And she talks about, you know, did you know how tall his top hat is? Did you know we used to keep speeches inside of his hat? You know, and she goes through and gives all these cool facts. And she talks, of course, about Grace writing him the letter about his whiskers and how we should grow whiskers. But I just love how appropriate it is for our young students. It's a beautiful, beautiful written and illustrated book as well. Fireboat, this book is so special to me. September 11th, of course, is a hard topic for our young kids, but it's something I think is so important. And for so many of us, you know, we lived September 11th. I know I was teaching school when everything happened, and it just really pulls at our heartstrings. So I love this book. It's talking about an old retired fireboat that they had just recently preserved. And on September 11th, they said, hey, do you think you can get this boat working? We want to be able to use it to help put out the fires. And it did. So it's a beautiful story as well. Now and Then, this is a favorite of all of my students. It kind of has that if-then format that one of the other books I shared has. One side of the page is what life is like now, and the other side of the page is what life was like with Benjamin Franklin, and it talks about the inventions that he created, why he created them, and how they changed our lives. So it's super, super appropriate for young children and just full of lots and lots of information. Thomas Jefferson Builds a Library is also a classic. Joanne actually got me hooked on Thomas Jefferson Builds a Library and Now and Then, and they're actually kind of what changed the whole way I taught social studies. I never could find books that were appropriate for my young first graders that weren't over their heads. And these two books, she kind of got me hooked on as a great start. So both of those are beautifully written. This one goes through and talks about how he built or helped to build the Library of Congress and how he donated his own books when the library burned. And it's just a beautiful story that the kids can relate to and is easy to understand. Water and Land, Joanne, again, got me into this one. I had to go on Amazon and get it as soon as she showed it to me. This book is amazing. It has very few words. Most pages just have 1 or 2 words on there, but it's the format of the book. So I actually have it so I can show it to you. And it's going to be backwards, so I apologize that the screen is reversed. But I don't know if you can see, it says lake. And then when you turn the page, it says island. Sorry that it's backwards. I know there's some way fancy to flip the screen, but I don't know how to do it. This one is talking about Gulf. And then when you flip the page, it's talking about peninsula. So it's just a really great format that I think presents the information in our kids in a way that they'll remember, but they'll also think it's super cool. You know, they think any kind of book like that is magical. Miss Pinkletink's Purse, this is one from the 2020 Notable Trade Book list. It's another book about kindness. I'm all about helping promote kindness and teaching children how to be kind because sometimes it doesn't come naturally. And Miss Pinkletink has this huge purse or this huge bag, and she's always giving things to other people from her bag. And then Miss Pinkletink kind of runs into trouble and she needs help for herself, and all these people kind of rally together and take care of Miss Pinkletink. So it's a beautiful book. And then United States versus Jackie Robinson. This is a beautiful story about Jackie Robinson that I really wasn't familiar with before I read the book. It's another one from the 2020 notable trade list. And basically what happens is Jackie Robinson's in the Army. He wants to play baseball. He can't play baseball because of his color. And then he's on the bus one day and he doesn't want to move to the back. And he didn't have to move to the back. That wasn't the law anymore, but he wouldn't move. So they kind of had him court-martialed for not following the rules, and it follows his court case, even though he did follow the rules. But it's a great story as well. And then the last one I want to show you is from the 2020 notable book list as well. And my friends who are loving All the Way to the Top will love this one as well. This is called How to Build a Hug. And I immediately started tearing up reading this book. If you have worked at all with students with autism, you'll know immediately that this book is about autism and about the way it feels for autistic children. But this little girl is talking about how it feels to her when someone hugs her and how offensive it feels. And she doesn't understand because everybody loves hugs. But when she gets a hug, it feels like sandpaper and scratchy socks and smelly cologne. And it just talks about how overwhelming hugs are for her. But she really wants to see what a hug feels like and why people love hugs. So she builds her own amazing squeeze machine to kind of learn what a hug feels like. But it's an absolutely beautiful book. It's very well written, but I think it also is so important for our kids because sometimes they don't understand or have empathy for other people. And I think this is a great book for teaching that and showing how things are different for other people. Wow. Okay, we raced through those super quickly. Now it's your turn. What books do you love? I believe Joy and Joanne put this link for you in the chat feature. If you want to share out books either in the chat or if you want to add books to this Google document, that would be even better because we would have them all recorded into one place. If there's a book that you love, what is it and how do you use it or why do you love it? What stands out about that book? And while you are thinking about that, I'm going to scoot to this last slide for me. I know that Joe has a document or a form that you fill out for your participation or survey as well for him. This is for us, for the Georgia Department of Education. We want to know how we did, what can we change, what can we do that would make this session better. We always want to be improving to make things more reachable to our audience. So what can we do to help better facilitate this session next time? And I welcome your comments, questions, concerns. How can I help you?
Cindy says Temple Grandin is an amazing advocate for autism and humane treatment for cows as well. So, and for those of you who missed Jennifer, when she showed the book about Waterland, she was showing it on her screen where her face is. So you may have missed it because it wasn't a slide in the PowerPoint. But
do I
check
need to
out
show it again?
No, but I think you should check out the book. Definitely.
Yes, it's an amazing book.
Yeah, because I think the real value of that book is having it in your hand and seeing how the cutouts really illustrate the different concepts.
Yes,
Yeah.
I literally gasped when Joanne brought hers to work one day. She said, "You've got to see this book. Tell me what you think." And it was like, "Oh, I love it." It's such a hard concept to explain to our students, and it was such a great visual way to do that.
Yeah, I can't even describe it. I think you have to actually see it. But
yes,
I urge you to get your hands on it.
Yes.
Liz says, Angry Dragon by Thierry Ruberecht, I may have messed that name up, is a great one for one of my behavioral students about understanding feelings and anger. Her students love it. So
yes.
I'm writing that title down as well. But we do encourage you to share your own titles in the Google Doc. And you'll also have access to that after this session is over. So
yeah, along that same line, My Mouth is a Volcano is a great one as well. It just talks about how sometimes the things that come out of our mouth aren't very nice and how that can affect other people. That's a great one too. And I'm trying to think of the one where it says she roared a red, red roar. I have to think of which one that is, but that's a great one as well. I'll put that one in the Google Doc as well.
Great.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions or comments, I guess we can turn it back over to you, Joe.
I was just going to say, who's got questions? Again, I try not to be super jealous of this great team that Georgia has and how well you guys work together and the expertise back and forth. And I definitely would encourage anybody here who's got a question or you're thinking about anything you'd like to ask the group. Again, They really do strong work. I hope you're seeing this from yesterday and today around the books that they're picking, the ways that we use books to teach and talk about social studies. And again, Jennifer's, what'd you say, it was just about a year now, right, out of the classroom.
Yes, 1 year.
And was using these in her classrooms.
Yep.
Yes.
So does anybody
I
have?
do see in the chat, Crystal said, we used My Mouth is a Volcano with the students, so they like that. And then Carolyn suggests When Sophie Gets Angry.
That's the one. That's the one where she had the red, red roar.
Right, right. So great. I'm jotting those down. So I need the one myself about My Mouth is a Volcano. As you know, sometimes my mouth is a volcano.
Yes.
How
Spaghetti
full?
and a hot dog bun is also a really great one.
Okay.
It's a good beginning of the year when I'm being kind.
And Jessica says, How Full is Your Bucket is another good one.
Yes.
And that's all I see. Wonder. Oh, Wonder. Yeah, of course.
Wonder. Yes.
And there's actually, besides the regular version of Wonder, there's a picture book version of Wonder too. So
yeah, it's a beautiful one.
So now it's accessible for any age student.
In the chat box, I did put the link to the contact hour form again, and just to make sure that we're clear, if you need the contact hour from me from the Maine Department of Education, please use that link. If you would like to provide feedback to the amazing social studies team at the Georgia DOE, they've got their form to provide feedback on this presentation as well. So a quick last call, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Jennifer.
We thank you for spending time with us today.
Yes, absolutely. And check Joy out tomorrow.
Yes.
So Jennifer and the rest of the Georgia team, but I know you were the featured today. I'd like to thank you on behalf of all these Maine educators, myself, again, for providing not only today, but yesterday and tomorrow, and just sharing the expertise and the wonderful work that you guys have done in Georgia.
Thank you for having us.